Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am super excited for today's show. As our audience knows, the Colorado Business Roundtable has a lot of partners that have events, and one of those really exciting events that's coming up is ApolloPalooza with the Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum. So I have in studio with me John Barry, who is the president and CEO of that museum. How are you doing, John?
Doing great. We're really excited about this starting this week. So it's, when we think about it, it's unique to the nation. No one else in this country is celebrating the 50th anniversary of the first man on the moon for an entire week, and we're doing it.
Fantastic. Yes. So it is a week long of events. First of all, I know you personally have a great passion for aviation and aerospace all together. So we'll talk a little bit about your background. But before we do that, what inspired you guys to do a week long?
We've been planning this for almost 2 years,
okay.
Because when you think about it, it was such a compelling time in the history of mankind. And those of us who were alive during that time, I can remember there were over 1 million people down at Cape Canaveral. And do you know that more than 500 million people watched it on TV? Now, I had my grandchildren, I was talking to him, and I told him the story. I said, "Grandpa, why were you watching a black and white TV?" I said, "Well, that was the only TV we had at the time. But I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy going through basic training. So this is a tough training. But they took a break with us, stuck us in a room that with 50 guys is about the size of this room. And we got to see when Neil Armstrong stepped off and stepped onto the moon for the first time.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So you were already into the Air Force
right.
when this happened. So your passion for aviation came long before really the ignition of passion for aerospace in a lot of people, right?
Yeah, of course, the 1960s. I mean, after President Reagan and President Kennedy mentioned in his announcement in 1961 that we were to put a man on the moon and bring him back safely before the end of the decade. That got everybody stirred up, and we knew we were in a space race with Soviet Union in those days. And to think that 2003 is when the Wright brothers flew for the first time. President Kennedy made his announcement in 1961, and of course in 1969 we put a man on the moon on July 20th. That was only 63 years after the Wright brothers. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. I love hearing that. So let's take a step back and let's talk a little bit more about you. So you actually retired in the Air Force after 30 years. You retired as a Major General. So we know that about you, but let's talk a little bit about your career pathway and ultimately how you ended up at the Wings Over the Rockies Museum.
Okay. Well, I grew up in the Bronx, and it was one of those things where you don't see too many airplanes in the Bronx. So there was a guy and his wife that lived across the hall from me. I lived in an apartment building, 1-bedroom apartment, and he was into remote-controlled aircraft. Well, he couldn't fly that in the Bronx, of course, and he did it in Long Island. So he took a bunch of us. I'd never been on an airport, talked to a pilot, touched an airplane. All that happened when I was about 11 years old, and I just started what the art of the possible is. And that's half the battle with most young people, is to know what the art of the possible is. So, of course, I got excited about it, and then I found out at the Air Force Academy and went out there in 1969. And that was, when we had the first man on the moon. So it all kind of tied together. So it was pretty prophetic on that sense. And then spent 30 years. So I was a fighter pilot. I flew F-4s, F-16s, and I had 26 moves in 30 years, so I won't bore you with all the moves. But, squadron commander, I was a group commander, as a wing commander twice. Spent over 2 years flying in combat, over in Iraq. And so the efforts, but the things that people might be interested in is I was a White House fellow in 1985-86, but that's when Challenger blew up. We lost a teacher in space, Kristen McAuliffe, who I got to meet a number of times, by the way. In fact, I was on the front page of the Washington Post one time where we kind of fly the zero gravity. You're actually floating in an airplane.
Yeah.
So Kristen McAuliffe is there, and Barbara Morgan. I told my kids, I said, "Your dad's on the front page of the Washington Post." They said, "Oh, that's cool, Dad." And I showed her the picture, and there's two ladies floating. "Dad, I don't see where you're there." And I said, "That's my foot. I had my foot there." So anyway,
it still counts.
It still counts. So anyway, after that, a number of different assignments. I was I was Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney's military assistant for 2 years, and which has got a little window on history. That's incredible. And then my last assignment that might be appropriate for today's conversation was I was the board member and then eventually the executive director for the Columbia Accident Investigation Board in 2003. So I was in NASA in 1986 when Challenger blew up, and of course I was asked to be on the investigation team and executive director for Columbia when it failed on reentry in 2003.
Wow.
So.
Yeah. Both tragic events. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've seen a lot in your career just in the military, right? I imagine that those impacted your life in a different way than maybe a civilian.
Well, you know, had another thing. I was in the Pentagon on 9/11 when it was attacked also. But one of the things that I'd like to tell the audience is that, you know, everybody has a story, everybody has experiences. I had some unique opportunities. But to think that we could put a man on the moon, okay, in light of, you know, we had the Apollo 1 fire in 1967. We lost 3 astronauts in a simulator, okay? And in July of 1969, we put man on the moon. You know, realizing the risks that I saw with the Columbia and the Challenger accidents and the thing, it just was absolutely phenomenal that the United States was able to pull it all together, and then all of the thousands and thousands of people. It wasn't just Neil Armstrong or, you know, Buzz Aldrin or Mike Collins. It was a team behind that, and it really is a credit to this country to be able to say that we did that in that amount of time. It just was a great story.
Oh, fascinating. And I like your outlook on that. And one of my favorite quotes you've given so far is the art of the possible.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's talk about wings over the Rockies. So the last time we had you on, you were speaking about exploration of flight, of which I got to go, and I got to do some of the amazing things that you've got there. We did one of the flight simulation rides. I got to land a plane. Terribly, but I landed it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes. Again, simulator. Mm-hmm. This is not real life. I didn't destroy an aircraft. So tell me what you've got going on, how the exploration of flight is going. What kind of feedback are you seeing?
Great. Well, you know, Lowry Air Force Base was in existence from 1937 to 1994. When it closed, there was these 2 huge hangars. For those who have been out to the museum, know what I'm talking about. We actually sold one of the huge hangars to help develop and improve on where the museum is now, where the B-52 is out front and all that stuff. So we've been in existence for 25 years. And one of the great visions for the board has always been to be able to have a second site, a second site that actually had flying airplanes. So we are officially, as of July 20th, interestingly enough, last year, when Harrison Ford, our co-chair, and Governor Hickenlooper, the other chair, helped us be able to garner the source to be able to build this. We have a second site. Now, we are officially one organization, 2 locations. So we have, and we will always have, a Lowry, which will be the heritage and history of aerospace, air and space. But now we have exploration of flight, which is out at Centennial Airport on the south side of the field. And we have 15 acres down there. Now we're going to build an amazing campus. We already have built one building called the Blue Sky Gallery, and that's meant to be the present and the future of aviation. We're starting a school this August called the Colorado Skies Academy for middle school, and it'll be project-based learning focused. And as a former superintendent of Aurora Public Schools for 7 years, from 2006 to 2013, I know the value of the education. Talk about the art of the possible, but also students need to know what things are available to them. But this campus will not only have the Blue Sky Gallery, but we're building a Black Sky Gallery here hopefully in the next 2 years, and that's for the present and future of space. Now, is that appropriate for this time of year, you know, especially celebrating Apollo?
Yeah.
And so we're also want to put some higher ed education programs, hopefully for aircraft maintenance and for aviation programs, which we're in conversation with a number of universities and colleges to do that. But, you know, the purpose of the second site is actually to help solve a problem. And that problem is there's an incredible shortage of pilots, aircraft mechanics, air traffic controllers, engineers in the aerospace sector. Now, this is why it is such an appropriate time to celebrate Apollo 11, the first man on the moon, because with that shortage, young people who are interested in aerospace, now aerospace is aviation and space, they will have people banging on their doors. They're not going to have to bang on somebody else's door because there's such a shortage. So it's exciting to think that we are an organization with one organization with 2 locations that's really unique to the nation.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating stuff. First of all, I've known about the pilot shortage for a while. As you know, I have an aviation background as well. This pilot shortage and air traffic control shortage, engineers, right? All of that is really starting to hit an apex. So I love that you're coming in with even middle schoolers, as young as middle school, to get that passion for aviation and start their careers as early as possible.
Exactly right. You know, the other thing we're proud of is that we've been recognized as the top 20 aviation museums in the world.
Wow.
By CNN. So that puts us in a pretty good category with a great responsibility. But the other thing, too, is the reason I say this is such a compelling time, particularly for young people, is it's almost like the 1960s. 1960s, we had this amazing space race, as we've talked about a little bit about, and we beat the Soviet Union. But now we are doing the same thing again, but we don't just have the public sector, the government doing it, NASA. We have Bezos, from Amazon and Blue Origin who wants to go to the moon. We've got SpaceX, with the aspects of putting man on the moon and maybe even Mars with Elon Musk. We've got Branson, who's just announced and went to an IPO just a couple of days ago, where he wants to take citizens to space, and just touch the outreaches of it a little bit. And then we've got never mind the Orion that NASA wants to put on the moon, and we have Sierra Nevada, which is a great sponsor of ours, by the way, with the Dream Chaser, that will be the only one that still lands from space as an airplane. The other ones all are going to come down in parachutes like the 1960s. But got all that going on, but it's not just the United States. I mean, we know about China, and we're in a space race with China to go back. Now, the administration has said that they want to put a man and woman on the moon by 2024. They want to build a habitat by 2028. China's saying the same thing. But we also have Israel just tried to put a rover, and unfortunately it didn't work this time. We've got China put a rover on the dark side of the moon just a few months ago. We've got Italy, we've got Egypt, all these different countries in the world. So what an amazing time to be a young person when all this activity is going and trying to make that outreach to the outer space.
I think it's fascinating as well. One of the things that I see actually a lot, especially in the aviation, the aerospace industry, particularly in Colorado, is that they're really great collaborators. While we're in a space race with China, are we working more with other countries on better technology for everyone, or are we still continuing to be competitive in that space?
Well, let me talk about, the International Space Station is a perfect example of how we've cooperated with multiple countries, and that's still up there. We've got astronauts up there today doing their thing and being able to contribute to the science and the understanding of what it's like to be in aerospace. But let me talk a little bit about Colorado for a minute. We were challenged by one of our supporters, and we told them about this great campus we're building on Centennial Airport and on. So we said, very impressive. I don't think you're thinking big enough. I said, okay. What do you think? He says, how about a Silicon Valley of aerospace in Colorado? So we got together with a bunch of people. We've been looking at this for over a year now. We've got industry and universities and higher ed, and even K-12. We've got former astronauts and things and like that discussing the subject. And we actually came up with a term. Instead of Silicon Valley of aerospace, we came up with the term Aerospace Alley. Now, the point is, why couldn't Colorado be the #1 aerospace state in the nation? Everybody goes, really, Colorado? Well, when you think about it, we have all the space, military space down in Colorado Springs. Got Peterson Air Force Base, Schriever Air Force Base, Cheyenne Mountain, we got Buckley Air Force Base. We have every industry, every company that's in the aerospace market, including small companies, except for one, and here in Colorado. We have a spaceport at Front Range Airport now. We're a mile closest to space. Now, when I say that, people always chuckle. But honest to God, after my 2.5 years associated with NASA, either investigating or as a fellow, that saves you millions of dollars. Okay.
Really?
And then on Space Elements, this is another thing that people don't know. We're the #1 per capita employed aerospace state in the nation. Now, California beats us on total numbers, but we have the largest per capita. But in addition to that, we build rockets, we build payloads, we, do the software, do everything but launch the rockets from Colorado, which we can do now at some future point. We have a spaceport out at Front Range Airport. So my question is, why can't we be the aerospace alley? Instead of this, Silicon Valley is all about software. But if you want to be in aerospace and you're a young person graduating from college, why not, come here? If you're a startup company, why not be coming to Colorado? So we're promoting this idea that's even bigger than what we have at our campus at Centennial Airport and the combination of all what we have. And this is really where all these industries and all these both public, private, companies can all work together to promote Colorado as the aerospace alley of the nation.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And speaking of thinking bigger, let's hone in on this ApolloPalooza event. Again, it's a week long of events that we've got going on. Tell me a little bit about the agenda. Who can I meet? And obviously, we need to sign up for it.
Well, the audience, if you want to go to wingsmuseum.org/Apollo, and that's you can get the full schedule. On Saturday, we start. Now, this is incredible. Joe Engel is going to be our first speaker about 1 o'clock, and he is a former pilot for the basically when they had an airplane, they went supersonic and into space, And then he also flew in space later on the shuttle. Then at 6 o'clock, we have Senator Jack Schmidt, and he was one of the 12 men who walked on the moon. He was the second to last man to walk on the moon. Gene Cernan, who was also from Colorado, unfortunately he passed away a few years ago, but Harrison Schmitt was the second to last. Gene Cernan was the last man to walk on the moon. And the other interesting thing, there are only 4 astronauts alive today of the 12 that walked on the moon, and Harrison Schmitt is one of them. He's our speaker at 6. He's also the only engineer. All the other astronauts that walked on the moon or flew, in the command module, of which there were, 18, but 12 of them walked on the moon. He's the only engineer. Every one of the others were pilots. So that was pretty significant too. So I think he's going to be able to give us a really unique insight. And then we have, scientists, engineers, we have astronomers, we have historians all through the week doing things. But we also have Gene Kranz on Tuesday. Now, Gene Kranz was a flight director for the Apollo 11. He was the man in charge of the ground station, being able to communicate. But he also was the flight director for Apollo 13. Remember when the movie was made and we went to the moon, but we couldn't land, because we had an oxygen system in the service module that blew up, and then it was just barely getting him back. Now, Gene Kranz ran that. He also is the author of the book that Failure is Not an Option. A lot of our audience will recognize that book. So he's going to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning for breakfast. We still have tickets for that, where he's going to have a steak and eggs, because that's what the astronauts ate before they launched on the 16th of July 50 years ago. And Gene will talk about that. And then he's going to speak also on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. So we have some tickets left for that also. But the people we've got coming in are just phenomenal individuals who can really give the background and the understanding of the whole space program. It's just a great combination of folks. Unique to the nation. No place else in the world is doing what we're doing this week.
Which is phenomenal. I am so impressed with what you guys have going on. This event is unprecedented and will be exciting for everyone that attends. You also had another really awesome thing. You had a PBS series that you did. I got to watch a few of the episodes. I didn't finish the series yet. I've been holding off on it. But that was fascinating. How was that for you?
Well, it's a great idea by some of our teammates. Ben Thiene is our program director of sorts on that. We got Scott Henley, and we got, of course, Matthew Burchett is our face of the museum. But behind the wings, is an idea that we've been doing for about a little over almost 2 years now. And it's short segments, and like behind the wings, behind the curtain. You get to see things that nobody else gets to see. And we've done episodes now, we've done over 30, 12 to 15 minute segments. But PBS got a hold of it and said, why don't you do a 30-minute segment? So we've done 4 30-minute segments, that have been already aired. And they were on Friday at 8:30 for 4 Fridays, and they're going to be aired again this year, and we're going to do 4 more next time. But I don't know too many museums have their own TV show,
right?
So we're really excited about that part. Right now, I think we're in 13 states. We've got a national recognition and an audience. The number of hits on social media are, right now we've got more hits than the Smithsonian, which is kind of hard to believe,
huge.
And the only one that beats us is the Experimental Aircraft Association in Oshkosh. Particularly, they have this big celebration coming up in July. So it is pretty impressive, and our team has done just such an amazing job.
Yes, they really have. I, for one, am excited to see more coming out of this. I know we have a few minutes left here in this last little bit. Obviously, you've got events that come up for the museum and things like that, but people should just visit anyway, anytime.
Well, when we think about what we have to offer, the museum at Lowry has been there 25 years, and we have made so many improvements on that. We've got a traveling exhibit right now that says Be the Astronaut. For those young people and even adults, have a great time on this. If you want to fly to the moon, to Mars, to Saturn, you can come there and actually do the preparation, the planning, and actually fly a simulator.
Yeah.
That allows you to do that, which I think is exciting. So we try to keep it fresh so nobody will ever say, been there, done that, don't need to go back. But we have airplane exhibits. We've got, Star Wars. We've got, we got this tremendous ride. We can fly upside down, roll around, and all that stuff, and give you a sense of it. But the airplanes we have, what makes us unique at the museum at Lowry is we have the full series of Century Series aircraft that were fighters, mostly in the Vietnam era, but the F-100, the 101, the 104, the 105, and even the F-4 we count in that category, and the 102. So that is, and then we got the B-52 out front, of course. And the B-52 is still flying,
yes.
And it is going to go to 2050. It will have been, that airplane will be flying for 100 years, So we already have grandchildren flying it that their grandfather flew, same tail number. And now we're going to have great-grandchildren. Flying an airplane. So there's so much to learn at the museum. And then out at, we already talked about exploration to flight out of Centennial Airport. But the 15 acres, as we develop that campus, will truly be unique to the nation. And we're so excited about the partnership we'll have. And the last thing I'll kind of allude to is, I mentioned the shortage of pilots and aircraft mechanics and air traffic controllers, but this is why this is unique at Centennial. We are a public and private partnership. Museum with an airfield. By the way, that is unique in itself. Then we're partnering with K-12 and higher ed, okay? And then we're partnering with the companies around the airport. And there are over, right now, the estimate is 10,000 people, about 200 companies for internships, externships, job shadowing, mentoring, Saturday programs, summer programs, and jobs. And this middle school that we're opening just this August, on August 19th, and there's still some slots open there for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. They are going to have a unique opportunity because they can see, smell, touch, hear aviation every single day. And the excitement and the availability that we're going to be providing with these internships, externships, job shadowing, mentoring, all those kinds of operations, again, is another unique element for the year.
Oh, man. Amazing stuff. I, for one, am a huge fan of what you've got going on. Exploration of Flight was awesome I enjoyed every minute that I had in that space. So again, visit wingsmuseum.org/Apollo. Get signed up for those tickets. You can see all of the awesome speakers that we have coming. It's a week-long worth of events, so be sure to get on board with that. Like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. You can find more information about this show in the description below, and find all of our past shows with John Barry at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Have a wonderful day.
Alex, thank you very much for the honor to be on your show.